Okay, Rabbi Stein, let's just review where we were holding. We're in the middle of a discussion. We had a Mishnah that told us that if you have two people who have the identical same name, Yosef ben Shimon is the example, then they cannot act as creditors against each other. In other words, Yosef ben Shimon A cannot produce a promissory note saying that Yosef ben Shimon owes him money and expect to extract it from Yosef ben Shimon B. Similarly, no other creditor from the outside community can come and force either Yosef ben Shimon to pay with a note that just says Yosef ben Shimon owes money, because each one can deflect and say, oh, that's the other Yosef ben Shimon. However, our Mishnah does agree that Yosef ben Shimon, either one of them, A or B, can act as a creditor against others. Why? Because the Gemara had said you don't need the absolute identity of the person to be identified in the shtar. But then we had another brisa, and the other brisa said that in the same right, we're on Kufayin Gimel. He says this brisa says that they cannot act as creditors. So if our Mishnah holds that they can act as creditors, either Yosef ben Shimon can act as creditors against others, then what does this brisa hold? Why does this brisa say, this brisa presumably would not disagree with the idea that if there's only two Yosef ben Shimons and we don't know which one it is for sure, then that's not a problem because the note still identifies that the holder is the creditor. Right? So then why would the brisa say that neither Yosef ben Shimon can act as a creditor against others? The Gemara had given us two answers, and the second answer is what we're analyzing now. The second answer is that it's the same machlokas as Abaye and Rava. Both of them hold that osios niknos b'mesira. And what that means is that even on the possibility that the Yosef ben Shimon who was bearing the note is not the real creditor, because he got it as a present from the other Yosef ben Shimon, but he still is allowed to use that note for collection, because we paskin that once a note that has monetary, as a financial instrument, is exchanged from hand to hand, that's a legal transaction, and the new bearer has the power of that financial instrument. What's the machlokas? If my name is not on that shtar, let's say I got a shtar from Plony, and my name is not Plony, his name is Plony, I can use that instrument to collect because I'm the bearer of that note. Rava says I don't even have to provide evidence that I acquired it legally. But Abaye says you need to provide evidence that you acquired it legally because your name is not on that note. And that's the machlokas between Abaye and Rava. And that's the same machlokas between our Mishnah and the Brisa. Our Mishnah holds that even if you're not the same Yosef ben Shimon that's listed as the creditor, you acquired the note from the other Yosef ben Shimon. It's no problem. And therefore you can act as a creditor against others. But the Brisa holds like Abaye that says, okay, it's true that you can act as a creditor because you acquired the note from the other Yosef ben Shimon, but prove that you acquired it legally. And that's why the Brisa says that until you provide that proof, you cannot use this note to extract money from others. So the Gemara now says, that's what we're up to now. It's Amar Abaye. It's about a dozen lines down. Amar Abaye, Mino Aminallah. How can I prove to you that when a person is bearing a note that doesn't necessarily have his name as the creditor on it, he can be demanded to show evidence that he acquired it legally? Detanya, echad min ha'achin shashtar chov yotze mitachas yado, alav lahavi raya. Because of the following brisa. The brisa says that if, let's say, Plony dies and he leaves over 5 sons with his estate. Within his estate is not only holdings, land holdings and chattel, but also he has promissory notes that have rights of collection from various debtors. One son comes along one day and he says, I am the sole creditor on this debt that was passed on to me from my father. And the other brothers claim, what are you talking about? We share that note equally with you. So the halacha is, alav lahavi raya, that brother who claims that it's solely his has to bring evidence, has to bring proof. And if not, then he's going to have to split that debt together with his other brothers. So you see that my lavu adin lachrini. It's not just the din of brothers, it's a din of anyone who has a promissory note that doesn't have his name but someone else's name, has to prove that he acquired it legally in order for him to collect on it. So Virava Omar Shaini Achen Desham Tu Mehadodi. And Rava's argument is no. It's only when you're dealing with brothers. And the reason why brothers are different is because of this concept of Sham Tu Mehadodi. Brothers like to slip away from each other, meaning that there's always a greater suspicion that one brother will be spiriting away money in secrecy. And therefore, because you're dealing with family dynamics, that's why you have to be more suspicious that perhaps one brother may have pocketed a note unbeknownst to the other brothers, and that's why he has to bring evidence. But with regular people, as long as the guy is bearing the note, he doesn't have to prove that he acquired it legally. That seems to be the way that Shamtu Mehadani means. That's the way I'm understanding it. I hope I'm not misinterpreting it. Ika da amri amar Rav amina amina la detanya echad min ha'achin sheshtar chov yotze mitachas yado alav lahavi raya achin hu deshamtu mehadari velachrina lo. So others learned that Rava brought this brisa as a raya that you don't have to bring proof. That it's only when it comes to brothers who tend to hide things from each other that there's this requirement of the brisa for the brother who claims that it's solely his to bring proof. But in a regular case of two strangers, there's no requirement to bring proof, and therefore, even though there's two Yosef ben Shimons, and I can't prove for sure that the bearer of this note is the original owner, he doesn't have to bring proof that he has rights of collection. And Abaya's argument would be just the opposite. Abaya says, no, it's not specifically to brothers, but it's true for all other people as well. If someone accuses you of not having gotten that note legally, you have to bring proof that you got it and you have rights to collection with it. Why does the Brisa give the example specifically with brothers? Because I might have thought that brothers are different. Specifically because brothers tend to hide things from each other, the brothers will be more careful when dealing with their father's estate. They'll watch each other like a hawk and make sure that no brother has does anything duplicitous. And therefore, you might have thought that for brothers, you for sure don't have to bring a raya because they've been watching each other very carefully. Kamash Malan, that sometimes one of the brothers can be especially devious and slip it away. So now the Gemara says, okay, so far we've seen two different opinions. We saw the opinion of our Mishnah, which said that neither Yosef ben Shimon can extract from each other, but they can extract from others. But no one can extract from them. Then we saw a brisa that said that just like no one can extract from them, they cannot extract from others as creditors. And now we see a third Mishnaic text. We see another brisa which has a third opinion, which says that just like they can act as creditors upon others, they can also act as creditors against each other. That means to say that if Yosef ben Shimon A bears a note that says that Yosef ben Shimon owes me money, he can use it to collect against the Yosef ben Shimon B. Completely keneged our Mishnah. So the question now is, so what's the machlokas between our Mishnah and this brisa on that matter? So the Gemara answers, Bekosvin shtar lelova ve'alfal pishen mal ve'imo kemiflagi. Tana didan savar kosvin shtar lelova ve'alfal pishen mal ve'imo. He says, so the Gemara says, the machlokas is like this. May a love go to a scribe independently of his creditor and hire a scribe to write up a promissory note saying that I owe you $1,000. Can I go to a scribe and say, listen, my name is Plony. I'd like you to do me a favor. Write up a shtar that says that my name is Shimon. Write up a shtar that I owe Reuven $1,000. Would you do that for me, please? So there's a machlokas whether a scribe is allowed to write up such a document in the absence of the creditor. So you would think, what would be the possible problem in doing that? All you're doing is generating debt. You're not generating asset. So the Gemara says, so one holds that you are allowed to, because Zimnin da'azil legabe safra v'sadi, And since you're allowed to, here's what we're worried would happen in the case of Yosef ben Shimon A versus Yosef ben Shimon B. What would happen if Yosef ben Shimon A goes to a sofer and he brings witnesses? Va'omar lahu kisvu lishtara diboim lemezaf mi Yosef ben Shimon chaveri. He says, do me a favor. I plan to borrow money from my friend Yosef ben Shimon B, and I want to be able to go and borrow the money from him without the delay of having to write up a note. So do me a favor, write up the note today that I owe you, Ruvain ben Yosef ben Shimon, $1,000. Ubasar dekasi v'chasmi le nakita le v'amar le havli meya diyasus minai. He then takes the note and he goes over to Yosef ben Shimon B and does the old switcheroo. And instead of borrowing money from him, he says, you owe me $1,000.
I knew it was going that way.
So if you allow a debtor to draft a note of debt, a promissory note, independently of the malveh, so then the scribe is not going to know any better. He does this all the time. And therefore he's going to write a note for Yosef ben Shimon A, and Yosef ben Shimon A will use that not as a note of debt, but rather as a note of credit. And Tana Barasa or Einkos V'Shar Lo Va'ad Shehei Malve'ima. The Brisa holds that a sofer will never do that. A sofer is not allowed to do that. And therefore, since the sofer was not allowed to do that, there's no fear that Yosef ben Shimon A will take a promissory note where he's the debtor and turn it into a letter of where he's the creditor. So that's the reason why the Brisa doesn't worry about that, and why Yosef ben Shimon A can use a promissory note to extract from Yosef ben Shimon B. Okay, let's go weiter. Nimsa le'echad bein shtaros of shtorish Yosef ben Shimon parua, shtorish neim pruin v'chule. The Mishnah had said yesterday that if, let's say, there's a creditor out there, and he has multiple promissory notes because he lends out money to a lot of different people, and among his notes, we find a document that says, the outstanding debt that I have against Yosef ben Shimon has been paid in full. But he's got two promissory notes, once against Yosef ben Shimon A, and one against Yosef ben Shimon B. But because this paper says that the debt has been paid, either Yosef ben Shimon can say to him, that document refers to my debt, not to the other Yosef ben Shimon's debt, and therefore I don't have to pay you. So basically both debts are wiped out. So taima de nimtza, halo nimtza matzah mapik, v'ha'anan v'lo acher yachal hozil ein shtar chov tanan. So the Gemara says, now wait a minute. You're telling me that this creditor cannot collect from either Yosef ben Shimon because we found that document among his papers? And that seems to imply that if there is no such document among his papers, he could collect using those promissory notes. But how can that be? If a promissory note simply says Yosef ben Shimon, then we said in the Mishnah that no outside creditor can collect from either, because either one can deflect and say that it's for the other Yosef ben Shimon. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah b'Mishulashin. So the Rabbi Yirmiyah says, because the promissory note says not only which Yosef, it says which Yosef ben Shimon it is, because it goes back to the grandfather as well. It says Yosef ben Shimon ben Yaakov. So that's what one note says, and the other note says Yosef ben Shimon ben Moshe. So therefore, there's two separate notes. We've clearly identified which Yosef ben Shimon is in each promissory note, and therefore an outside creditor can collect with those notes. But wait a minute, but if that's the case, v'nechsi tabru b'shmo deman dichsiv. So if that's the case, then let's look at the document, that's the receipt that says paid in full from Yosef ben Shimon. Let's see which Yosef ben Shimon's written on that document. So Amar of Hoshia b'Mishulashin b'shtar ve'ein Mishulashin b'shoivar. The answer is because the identity of each Yosef ben Shimon goes back 3 generations only on the promissory notes, but on the receipt that says paid in full, it only says Yosef ben Shimon, and it's not specified who Shimon's father is. Abaya Amar Hachikamer. So that's one answer. But Abaya says, I'll give you another answer. We're not talking about a guy who's a creditor that we find this receipt in his papers. We're talking about Nimsa L'loiva ben Shtarosa. Shtar shel Yosef ben Shimon alai parua. Shtar shneim pruin. What it means is, says Abaya, if let's say there are 2 Yosef ben Shimons in the neighborhood, both of them lend out money. And this guy has borrowed money from both Yosef ben Shimons. And he's got a document, he's got a receipt in his possession that says that the debt to Yosef ben Shimon has been paid in full. So when either Yosef ben Shimon comes to him and says, pay me the money that you owe me, he can say, I have a receipt that I paid you in full. So that's what our Mishnah is talking about. It's not talking about a creditor, because a creditor can't collect from either Yosef ben Shimon. But the Yosef ben Shimons can act as creditors. But in this situation, since the debtor is holding a paper that says that the debt to Yosef ben Shimon has been paid in full, he can deflect both of them and prevent both of them from collecting their respective debts. Now, the Rashbam does say, I know what you're about to ask, he says if the two of them work together, they can collaborate. He says, listen, bottom line is, we know that there are two debts. One was generated by Yosef ben Shimon A, and one was generated by Yosef ben Shimon B. All he's got is one document. So if the two of them collaborate and say we're coming together as a corporation of collection, right, to collect both debts, they can do that. It's called writing a harsha to each other. And then in that situation, they can at least collect one of the debts, right? And that it'll have to be the small. Let's say one debt was for 100, the other debt was for 500. At least they'll be able to collect the 100 and either split it or they'll divvy it up however way they want to. But the point is that one debt at least can be collected between the two of them. Okay, let us go weiter. Okay, Keitzad Yasu Yishaleshu v'chulei, and Tana im ha'yishneim kohanim yichtavu doros. So the Mishnah had said, what happens? You told me that if they're both Yosef and Shimon, how do you identify them uniquely? So you go back a further generation and you say Yosef ben Shimon ben Yaakov, Yosef ben Shimon ben Moshe. What happens if their fathers' names are the same? So the answer is then identify them either as a Kohen or a Levi, and that way. What if they're both Kohanim? So that's where the Brisa adds, and it says you go back as many generations as you need to. You go back a fourth generation, but eventually you'll hit pay dirt, and you'll be able to find an ancestor that has a different name from the other ancestor.
Aiden doesn't enter the discussion. You have to clarify.
Well, how are the Adim supposed to clarify? We looked at his driver's license and it said Yosef ben Shimon. So the Mishnah had said that one solution is to use identifying physical signs. The short Yosef ben Shimon versus the tall Yosef ben Shimon. You can do that too. Okay? Let us go on to the next Mishnah. Ha'omer livno shtar ben shtarosai parua ve'ini yodeya ezehu shtaros kulan pruin. So a man is on his deathbed and he tells his son, I'm leaving you a lot of promissory notes as the Yerusham. You can collect from all my debtors. The problem that is, son, that one of my debtors paid me back in full and I didn't yet write him a receipt. And he didn't demand of me to give him the promissory note. So one of these promissory notes is not usable. The halacha is that none of the notes are usable because you don't know. You don't know which one was paid and which one wasn't paid.
Why can't he go to everyone and ask them?
Well, if he does, then fine.
Not every guy's going to lie.
But all you need is one guy to lie. So all you need is, in other words, he can collect from anyone who tells the truth.
Right.
But if anyone chooses to lie,
you can't force the collection.
You'd have to say to him, listen, my father told me before he died that your debt may have been collected. Are you the guy?
Right.
Yeah, so enachinami.
Not every guy's going to lie.
No.
Most people won't.
I think you're right, Mendel. Right. So
unless they're brothers. If they're brothers, it's a different story.
Nimtza le'echad sham shnayim hagadol parua v'hakatan eino parua. And you remember, the Mishnah is telling me what the power of collection is, not what's going to happen b'mitzias, right? So and then the Mishnah says that if, let's say, my father told me that only one note has been paid. Let's say there's a debtor who borrowed twice. There are two loans to one debtor. So then I have the power of collection of at least one loan from that guy because I know that only one note was paid. So if that guy has two outstanding notes, I can use at least one note to collect.
Present both of them to him.
I present both of them to him, and I only have the power of collection of the lesser of the two. So if the guy says, I already paid you the bigger loan, then I can only collect the smaller loan. Okay, next. The Gemara says, Amar Rav, ashtar lecha biyadi parua, hagadol parua v'hakatan eino parua. If a man says if Reuven says to Shimon, I know that I have a note, but I know that this note I know that there's a note that I have of yours I'm your creditor, but I know that one of the notes that I have against you was already paid. So in the event that the creditor has multiple notes against the guy, that declaration will only allow him to collect the smaller of the two debts in the event that he doesn't know which one is which. However, says Rava, if he says the word chov instead of shtar, you see the word shtar means a promissory note. The word chov means debt. If he uses the term generically as debt, the debt that I have against you has been paid, he doesn't necessarily mean just one debt. He means all debt that I have against you has been paid. And therefore, the debtor can then say, you already made a public declaration that I've paid you back in full everything. And therefore, no matter how many notes you produce against me, I don't have to pay you anything. So, Amar le Ravina le Rava, Ela me'ata, Sadi mechura lecha, Sada gedola mechura lo, Sada sheyesh li mechura lecha, Kol sadosov mechura lo, question mark. So Ravina says to Rava, if a guy makes a declaration and you're going to liberally interpret everything that he says, so then what if a man makes a declaration in public and he says, I've sold you a field. I've sold you my field. So does that mean that he means that he's by automatically, since you're being so liberal in your interpretation, he means the largest of his fields? And furthermore, what if he says, the field that I have, and you're saying that the word debt can be interpreted as all debt. So maybe you'll interpret the word field as all of my land. Is that the way you're going to interpret it? And if a person says, Sada Sheyeshli, the field that I have refers to all of his property, and therefore he's got to relinquish all of his property to the person that he's made that declaration to, that sounds pretty far-fetched if you're being so liberal in your interpretation of a person's public declaration. So the Gemara answers, Hasam yad balashtar latachton. He says, no, says Rava, because in that situation, remember, you got to look at who's extracting, who's the extractor. Hamotze mechavero olav haraya. When I make a declaration that's ambiguous, that you've already paid me, then we always are liberal on behalf of the person who is the muhsuk, who is holding on to assets. So in the case of loans, if I've made a statement that's ambiguous, that you've paid me already, so I interpret it as being most in favor of the muhsuk. And therefore, if I claim that you paid me the smaller debt, and you claim that you paid back the larger debt, we always side with the guy who's holding the money. In the case of land, that's why we're not going to interpret it liberally. If a guy who's a landowner and he says, I sold you my property, he doesn't mean all his property. He gets to define what he meant because he's the muhsuk on the property. And therefore, like we said, the guy who wishes to extract has the burden of proof. Let's go on to the next mission. Hamalves chaver al yedei arev lo yifra min ha'arev, ve'im amar lo almana she'efra mimi she'ertze yifra min ha'arev. We're now getting into the law of arevus, which is the act of being a guarantor. If a person lends money using a guarantor, Reuven lends money to Shimon, and Levi acts as the guarantor. Mendel, you're probably familiar a little bit with this, right? So, lo yifra min ha'arev, you should not, Mendel runs a gemach, so lo yifra min ha'arev, you should not extract from the guarantor. You cannot extract any money from the guarantor. However, which is strange, because then what's the guarantor for? So we'll see in a minute. But if the lender said that I am lending you this money on the condition that I can collect from the guarantor, then he can collect from the guarantor. Now, Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, im yesh nechasim l'loy ve'ben kachu ben kach lo yifra min ha'arev. That's only true, says Rav Shimon Gamliel, if the debtor doesn't have money. But if the debtor has money, then in all situations you can never collect from the guarantor. V'chein haya Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, ha'arev le'isha b'ksuvasa v'haya bala megarsha yadirena hana'a shemayasu kenunya al nechasim shal zeh v'yachzer es ishto. And another halacha that Rav Shimon Gamliel said related to a guarantor is as follows. Let's say a woman is facing a marriage proposal from a suitor, but she's worried that the suitor is a schlepper. He doesn't have enough money. He's not going to be able to support her. And even if he promises her a ksuva, if upon termination of the marriage, his estate will not have enough money to pay out the ksuva. She doesn't really want to marry him. So a guy comes along who's a friend of the suitor, and he says to the woman, don't worry, marry him, and if he defaults on the ksuva, I'll pay you. I'll pay out the ksuva. So Taka, what happens? She marries the guy, and then they get divorced. So the guarantor has a right in that situation to, before paying out the ksuva, to require the ex-husband to make a neder that he's never going to benefit from that woman ever again. Why? Because we have to fear that maybe there's collusion between the husband and wife. They said, listen, our rich friend, promised that he'd pay out the ksuva. Great idea. Let's get divorced. We'll collect the ksuva from that guy. We'll get remarried. And we'll go on a honeymoon. Right? So
they deserve each other.
They deserve each other. It's pretty treacherous, huh? So therefore, in order to make sure that they don't collude to deceive the guarantor, the husband has to make a neder that he'll never remarry her. And only under those conditions can we collect from the guarantor. We'll get to that case later, but let's go back to the first issue of what is a guarantor and what is the purpose of it. Because the Gemara says, my time, why can't you collect from a guarantor? So Rabbi Rav Yosef Amri to Ravayu, Gavra Ashlimasli, Gavra Ashlimilach. So they say that really, what's the purpose of a guarantor? The purpose of a guarantor is not to guarantee repayment of the loan. The purpose of a guarantor is to guarantee that the loiva will show up to court. So the guarantor says, listen, all I promised is that the guy's never going to skip town. He's here. You know where he lives. Go to his house and get the money. Don't hack me. I didn't promise you money. I just promised that I would present the loiva. So I promised the loiva wouldn't run away. And there he is. Go ahead and get your money. But you can't come to me for money. So the Gemara says, Maskef lo Rav Nachman, Hai Dina de Parsoi. He says, I can't believe what you guys are saying. This is Persian law that you're saying. So the Gemara says, what does he mean, Persian law? Bava Basra Arva Azli. 1 second. In Persian law, they do use a guarantor to force him to pay back the debt. So what do you mean by that? Ela Beidina de Parsoi de lo Yavi time lo milsayu. What Rav Nachman was saying is that it's not literally Persian law. But what I mean to say is that just like certain laws in the Persian code book are totally nonsensical, what you just said is like Persian law in the sense that it's nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. So, in other words, a guarantor is not a guarantor to make sure that the lova shows up. He's a guarantor on the loan. That's what the malva cares about. He doesn't care about whether the lova is going to come to the shtibel or not. He wants to get his money. So Ela Amar Rav Nachman, my lo yifra min ha'arev, lo yitva arev techila. So rather, what does it mean? When the Mishnah says that you can't demand payment from the arev, it means not that you can't ever demand payment, but you can't go to him as the first in line for payment. You can only go to him as a second resort, not as a first resort. Tanya nami hachi, hamalvis chaver al yidei arev, lo yitva arev techila. That's what the Brisa says. The Brisa says that if you use a guarantor, you cannot go to him first for payment, but you have to go first to the loiva. But if it's specified at the time of the loan that the lender can go to whomever he wishes first, so then you can even go to the arev, to the guarantor, as a first line of collection. So Amar Rav Huna minayin la'arev de mishtabed. So Rav Huna now says, from where do we know this concept that a person can simply make a verbal declaration and be indebted as a guarantor? In other words, where does this concept come from in the Torah that a person can even be made into a guarantor on a loan where he never borrowed the money? So the Gemara says, Dichsiv anochia ervenu miyodi tevakshenu. Because the Pasuk says that when Yehuda was begging Yaakov to bring down Binyamin to Egypt, remember, Yaakov had refused, right? So Yehuda says, listen, Father, I will be the Arev. I will be the guarantor. So you see that there's such a thing as a guarantor, that even though I'm not a party of interest, it's Binyamin and you, and it's not having to do with me. So therefore, you see that he can be an Arev. So Maskef la Reb Chizda ha-kablanusi, Tichsiv tenos al yadi va'ani ashivenu elecha. So Reb Chizda challenges this, and he says, but wait a minute. We're going to see a concept called Arev Kablan in just a moment. The term Arev Kablan refers to not someone who's really a guarantor, but someone who is basically saying, Levi says to Reuven, give that $1,000 to Shimon, He uses the verb give, to tain. Give that money to Shimon, and by using that kind of language, it's basically saying that it's as if you're lending it to me directly. That's what a kablan is, a person who basically says, give him the money on my behalf. And when a person does that, then of course he becomes first in line for collection, because it's as if Reuven lent the money to Levi directly. And because Yehuda used the language of tina oso al yadi, because he used the same verbiage of give, then essentially Yehuda was making himself into a kablan, into an ariv kablan. And therefore that's not a standard guarantor. A standard guarantor is lend him and I'll guarantee it. But that's not what was going on over here. And therefore we're going to need another pasuk. And as we'll see in a moment, we're going to get a pasuk from Mishlei. Now the problem over here is, as you see in your daf, I don't know if you have it the same margin notes that I have, but in many of the margin notes, some put it in the Mesoras Hashas, some put it in the Hagos V'Tziyunim, there's a very serious problem with this whole Shakla V'Tarya. The serious problem is that if you look in the Chumash, the words Anochia Ervenu were said by Yehuda. But the words Tana Oso Al Yadi were not said by Yehuda, they were said by Reuven. And so this whole Gemara is really, sadly, and shockingly, misquoting the Psukim. And is attributing to Yehuda something that he never said. And so the margin note says that in the Sheiltos it has a totally different girsa in the Gemara. And the different girsa is as follows, that Omer le Rav Chisda Hasam Yehuda Gufe Lovehu Dichsiv Shilcha Hanar Iti. That the question is not that Yehuda was an Ariv Kablan, but the question is that Yehuda was the borrower. Because even though Yehuda said, I'll be the guarantor, what he was essentially doing is treating Binyamin as chattel. And he was saying, Father, give me your beloved possession, Binyamin, and I will borrow him, and I promise to return him to you. So Yehuda is not a guarantor, he's a borrower. Right. So that's not the mechanism of guarantor, that's a mechanism of a loiva. So therefore you can't bring proof from that pasuk. So therefore we're going to have to use another pasuk. Ella Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Mehacha, or some say, the other gear says Amar Rav Chisda Mehacha. Lak lekach bigdo ki arev zar uvaad nochriya chableu. Mishlei says, take his garment because he is a guarantor for a stranger, meaning a third party, and on behalf of a foreign woman, you may take his possessions. Now, what that essentially means is that a person who's not a party to a loan can act as a guarantor and have his money extracted in order to make good on the loan. Va'omer. And here's another section in Mishlei that teaches us the same thing. It's from a different parak. It says, B'ni im arafta l'reyecha takata lazor kapecha. He says, my son, if you have acted as a guarantor for your friend, if you have shaken hands for a stranger in order to seal the deal, no kashta b'imrei picha nilkadata b'imrei picha. And another thing that if you've done it, which is what? If you've done something to insult your friend by using your mouth in a regrettable way, so asay zos efo b'ni v'hi natzeo. He says, I'm going to give you the following advice, my son. So one mistake you made is that you made yourself into an arev. Another mistake you could have made is that you insulted someone. So what should you do in both cases? So if you've come and shaken hands to act as a guarantor for your friend, so the only option that you're going to have is to open up your hand and pay up. Meaning, that meaning that if you've been a guarantor and you owe the money, you're going to have to open up your hand and release the money from your hand and pay up. And as far as the second thing that you may have done wrong, if you've insulted your friend, so in that situation, you're going to have to bring other people to appease him so that he will finally forgive you. And it seems to me that the reason why the Psukim and Mishlei connect these two is that in both situations, there is liability that I have against, I owe someone something. In one case, I owe someone money, even though I didn't get anything from it, but I still owe him. And in the case of insulting someone, I didn't get any benefit from insulting him, but I still now am liable to him to appease him and ask him for mechila. In both situations, you're generating debt where you get absolutely no benefit from it. Okay? So Amar Ameimar, Arev de Mishtabed Machlokas Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yosef. So Ameimar now says something, again, that's shocking. He says, the whole concept of Arev is a machlokas tanoim, whether such a thing can even work. That if a person can ever be legitimately assigned as a guarantor. Because l'Reb Yossi, the Omar Smach the Kanya, Arev Mishtabed. L'Reb Yehuda, the Omar Smach the Lo Kanya, Arev Lo Mishtabed. And the machlokas will be, remember a couple of days ago, we saw those whole machlokas, whether Asmach the Kanya. If a person makes a statement, a guarantee, that's conditioned on a condition that he never expects to be fulfilled. He says, if the sky is green tomorrow, I'll give you $1 million. Well, what happens if, copper dust spreads to the sky and its sky turns green? He never expected that to happen. So is his conditional statement binding legally or not? So Rabbi Yossi says that it is legally binding, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's not legally binding, asmachta lo kanya. So in the same thing over here, a guy says, yeah, lend Shimon money. I promise you, if he doesn't make good, I'll pay you back. He doesn't, right, Mendel? He doesn't legitimately expect to be on the hook for the loan, right? And therefore, only according to Rabbi Yossi is he legally an arev, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, says, asmachta lo kanya, he's never going to be held liable. He can't be held liable because he never expected the condition to be fulfilled. So Rav Ashi says to him, remember, that's impossible. Because we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that asmachta lo kanya, and yet we still use an arev all the time in loans. So Ella Amar Rav Ashi be'ahi anah dekomeheman le gomer mishtabed nafshe. And the answer is, says Rav Ashi, that no, it's not an asmachta. The only time that Rabbi Yehuda says asmachta lo kanya is when a person makes a guarantee that's predicated on a condition, and he gets no benefit from making this promise. He says, yeah, if the sky is green tomorrow, I'll give you $1 million. He's not getting it. There's no benefit coming to him. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda says you don't take him seriously. But if I make you a guarantee that if that such and such thing will come true, then I get benefit from that statement. So then if that condition is fulfilled, then I do have to make good on that guarantee. And in a case where I promise to act as an arev, I do get benefit. I get immediate benefit. You know why? Because my esteem in the financial community has now been elevated. Oh, Levi is willing to guarantee Shimon's loan? Oh, Levi must be a chush of a guy. Levi must be a chush of a balabas. And now everyone will think that Levi is loaded.
Also, he owes you a favor. The guy
your friend.
And also, well, the language of the Gemara, behahu hana'a de kameheman le. The very fact that people believe Levi is an honorable man willing to make good on other people's loans is in itself, his reputation gets elevated in the eyes of the community, and that is beneficial to him. And that's not an asmachta anymore. That's something that he's willing to go on the hook for a loan because he's actually getting tangible benefit from that. Okay, let us go weit. And that's why an Orev works, according to everybody. What if the stipulation is made that I can collect from either party? So then I can even go to the Orev first. So Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Lo shanu ela she'ena chasim l'loiva. Avol yeshna chasim l'loiva lo yifra min ha'arev. So that's only true, says Rabba bar Barchana, if the lova has no money. But if the lova has money, I can't go to the arev first. I have to first collect. Regardless of what I stipulated, I always have to go to the lova first. But wait a minute, how can you say that? V'hamidikatani sefer Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer im yeshna chasim l'loiv v'lo yifra min ha'arev michlal l'tana kama sar v'lo shna hachi v'lo shna hachi. Well, how can you say that, Rabbi Bar Chana? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel argues with the Tanakama, and he says, regardless of what the stipulation was, you always must go to the lova first. So doesn't that imply that according to the Tanakama, if you structured the deal properly, you can go to the RA first, even when the lova has money? So how can you reconcile it? So he says like this, Rabbi Bar Chana cannot possibly conceive that when the lova has money, you have a right to go to the RA first. See, there must be therefore something missing from this Mishnah, and therefore you have to read it as follows. Hamalves chaber al yidei arev lo yifra min ha'arev. That if you lend money using an arev, you can never go first to collect from the arev. Vim amar al manashe from misha erza yifra min ha'arev. But if he said, I have a right to collect from whomever I wish, then you can go to the arev first. However, but that's only when the lova has no money. But if the lova has money, then even when you made that stipulation, you cannot go to the arev first. The kablan, now we're going to talk about another kind of arev, which is called a arev kablan. And an arev kablan, like I said, is a person who says, give the money to Shimon, it's as if you're giving it to me. I'm making myself into a borrower, not a guarantor, when I use that kind of language. And therefore, afal pishiyesh nechasim l'lova yifrim in a kablan, then the Tanna Kama holds, because he's designated himself as an arev kablan, then he can collect from the arev first, even when the lova has money. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, im yesh nechasim l'lova echazeh ve'echazeh lo yifra mehen. And that's where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel disagrees. Even if the guy made himself into an arev kablan, you first must go to the lova. If the lova has money, you take his money first, even by an arev kablan, and then only afterwards you can go, if the lova has no money, to go to the kablan.
What happens if the lova doesn't have cash?
I have one more line, Mr. I have one more line. So if I could just finish the one more line. So Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Makom Sheshana Rabbi Shimon Gamliel b'Mishnaso Halacha Kamosu Chutz Me'arav Etzidan V'Raya Achron. And Rabba Bar Bar Chana says that normally we always paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel when he argues with the Tanna Kama, except for 3 cases in all of Shas. And this is one of the 3 times when we don't paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. And therefore we paskin that if a person makes himself into an arev kablan by using the language, give the money to Shimon, and I'm now, it's as if you're giving it to me. So then we paskin like the Tanna Kama that the creditor can go first to the arev even when the lova has money.
Yeah.
The other 2 cases are Tzidon and Raya Achrona. And the Rabbeinu Gershom tells, we've seen this idea before. Tzidon is a halacha where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that if a man says to his wife, you are hereby divorced on the condition that you bring me my silken scarf, then even if she's lost the scarf, but she brings him cash, the equivalent, then she's fulfilled the Tanai and she's divorced. The Chachamim disagree with that. And the case of Raya Achron is a Gemara in Sanhedrin, that if the Beis Din gives a person 30 days to bring evidence, and on day 31 he brings Eidim, so Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says we accept that as evidence, and the Chachamim say we don't. So in those 2 cases we don't, plus our case, we do not paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. And we'll hold it here for today. Gershom, what was your question?
I was just going to ask, what happens if the lova just has property, no cash?
It would seem that the Gemara makes no distinction between the 2. That's what it would seem to me. Anyone saying Kaddish?